Last week we caught up with the legendary voice of the Indianapolis 500. Here's part 2 of our interview with Paul Page. You end up dropping out of college. You mentioned your mentor, Sid Collins, the voice of the 500, and he was the man who coined the phrase, the greatest spectacle in racing. He ends up committing suicide after he is told that he has Lou Gehrig's disease. And you even managed at that time in the 70s to recover from a helicopter crash while you were reporting a traffic report in 1977. And again, all of this is in the book. When you look back, even the military experience that you had, would you have done anything differently? And what do you believe shaped your career the most?
No, I wouldn't do anything differently because I followed my passion. I had determined early on in my life that you need to go do what you love. And if you do that, then things will come to you. Well, of course, when I got to the Speedway and I started working as a news guy at the radio station that Sid Collins was at, I had done a interview with the kid that won the soapbox derby. And I took it back to the station. It made the air, and Sid's standing there and he's looking at me and he had his arms folded over his chest and he's shaking his head and he said, "That's the worst interview I've ever heard." Well, you know, my heart is crushed. I'm done. I'm never going to see the radio network. But then he took me into a back studio and he started teaching me how to interview. And that just continued. He kept talking about the race. But at the end of every one of those sessions, it was, "But we don't have any work for you on the radio network. You're not going to make the radio network." But just listening to him. And then 2 years before his passing, he said, "You're my understudy. You're going to be the next voice." And I said, okay, yeah, from him, that sounded like a pretty good promise.
Absolutely. And you get that first press pass for the 500 in 1965, 27 Indy 500s later, including the 100th running in 2016, which I know is special. That's my favorite. I actually have a pretty cool ring here. It's a replica of Alexander Rossi's.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. A way to spend some money, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's my favorite. I was there for that one. I know that is one of your favorites, but when we've spoken in the past, you've often said 1982 is special for you. Is that still tops?
Yeah, because that's John Cock and Mears, what we're talking about there. And Gordon John Cock, who was a veteran driver, and Mears, who was really 3 years into it. Toward the end of the race is 200 laps long. And at about the 185th lap, I was looking at my stopwatch, timing the laps and timing the intervals actually between the two. And I do my arithmetic, and then I push the button to all the announcers on the circuit, and I say, "Guys, the way I calculate it, they are going to be side by side at the white flag with one more lap to go. So we're going to play that story to the end of this." And it worked out exactly that way. With approaching the finish line on the last lap, the 200th lap, 500 miles, Rick darted out to try and make a pass. He was right in the draft of Gordon Johncock, but he waited just a little too late, and Johncock kind of moved him around in the turn one going into the lap. So I don't know that he lost his fighting spirit, but Johncock outthought him and drove him. And that's 64 100ths of a second was the finish. That was the closest finish in history then. If you can believe it, we've got closer finishes since then.
That was a great race.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could tell where those cars were on that last lap. I'm in this control tower in the center of the pit area, so the center of the main straightaway. I could tell where those cars were by the crowd. I had this stereophonic effect going around me, quadraphonic, I guess. I was listening to the other announcers, and I'm suddenly realizing through my headset and everything, I'm hearing the crowd cheer those cars on as they go around the track. That was pretty special.
You know, 2020 is another memorable year, but obviously for not so many good reasons. But I really feel like racing kept us going. And at that time, virtual racing really was the only thing that we had on TV. So last year at this time in May, you got a chance to call the Legends Trophy virtually for the 500 in place of the Indy 500. What was that experience like?
Well, it was cool. I was making my comeback. Hey, somebody actually out there remembers. It was really fun. I got to do a couple of those opportunities. And when I realized, especially with the drivers, I go to their homes here, and the rigs that they have, I mean, they got $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in building up a cockpit with multiple screens on each side. And this is pretty serious stuff. So they asked me to do a couple things for it. They asked me to do some intros and and stuff like that. And I was overwhelmed. You know, I'm back. I'm back. I may be digital, but I'm back.
Oh, it was so great to see you do that race virtually. And one of the drivers actually in the race is a good friend of yours. I got a chance to interview him right here on BronxNet, and that, of course, is the legendary Mario Andretti. He did the forward for your new book.
Yeah.
Why is Mario, the perfect person for that task?
Well, when you think, one, he's a very good friend. He's always been kind to me. He's taken me for rides. He's been out to his house when it was in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. He took me out in his Ferrari F4 and his Lamborghini Countach, and we just been buddies. Gone by his winery a couple of times, but you got to think about it. Formula One world champion, Daytona 500 champion, Indianapolis 500 champion. You put those together, and I think there is an argument that he is the greatest driver ever. And so I mentioned it. He said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do something." But when it arrived, the very first sentence on it is, "Paul Page is not a rat." Well, I'm not a rat. And what he was saying was that I was a guy who kept the secret. Somebody told me something and said it was secret. I kept those secrets, which in racing, of course, is very important. If I tipped my hand on anything that I knew, then because I knew stuff that won races, and I couldn't bring it out. And after the win occurred, I could say, I remember talking with so-and-so, and they said they were going to try that, and that was permissible. But at least I'm not a rat.
Well, I mean, speaking of all-time great racers, someone that would be in that conversation, another legend, this month we got to say goodbye to the great Bobby Unser, and you gave his eulogy in Albuquerque. And Bobby once said of you, "When I get together with Paul, we tell the stories that never end, the good times, the crazy times, and of course, the unforgettable times." What did Uncle Bobby mean to you, Paul?
Oh, I by the way, just got back from Albuquerque. I'm in Indianapolis now. That's a huge hole. That's not just a huge hole for me. That's a huge hole for the sport of racing. He was truly unique. He was funny. We played practical jokes on each other like all the time. I'll tell you a joke that we played together. We were at a restaurant in Sherbrooke, Canada. We were up there to do some snowmobiling together, and Big Al and Little Al were with us as well. So we went to this really nice restaurant, very expensive restaurant, and the PR guy from Skidoo was also there. He's going to make sure we're in the right place at the right time. And so the PR guy got a lot drunk, and he was getting ready to sign the check, which is a pretty big check because we all had steak and everything. And he's getting ready to sign the check, and he says, "I can't read this. Paul, you put the tip on it." Well, we didn't like this guy much because he was, pushing us a bunch of different directions. So I leaned over to Bobby and I wrote down a tip of $300, and I nudged Bobby, and he goes, "Yeah, you do it." And I slid it across, and we left. And the next night we came back, and I'll swear they threw somebody off a table so we could sit in and eat because they'd seen the $300 tip. And we kept it, PR guy never said anything about it. So we got away with it. But that's the kind of things we would do.
So many wonderful stories, Paul, and they're all captured here in the book. I tried my best to put some things out here on the table that would kind of commemorate
You've done it.
Your career, and that includes a beautiful picture of Bobby Unser winning the 500 with an autographed business card. I have an autographed business card of yours, and of course the book jacket from your newest book, and then can't have a table without a car from Mario Andretti on the table for the segment. So
you've done perfect. You got all of the stuff you need there. That's really pretty impressive stuff.
I even got I don't know if our fans at home can see it, but I have a pretty cool lapel pin that says Paul Page, voice of the 500.
You've got that's a collector's item. I think 3 of you have them.
Hello, I'm Paul Page. It's race day in Indianapolis. Is available in person and online at Barnes & Noble and Amazon, indie booksellers, and all major retailers. Pick up a copy today. It's sure to race off the bookshelves this month. Thank you so much, Paul, for being the soundtrack of my childhood.
It's really fun to be here with you, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.